Good afternoon. My name is Steve Poftak. I am the General Manager of the MBTA. Before we get started today, I'd like to ask everyone to join me in a moment of silence. We held a funeral today for an MBTA employee who died 2 weeks ago in a tragic accident. It is a difficult day for the MBTA family. We remember Bernadette Etienne Day here at the MBTA. So if everyone would please join me just in a moment of silence. Thank you. Thank you, and we will surely keep Bernadette's memory alive in our hearts. It was a special opportunity to talk with the family today and learn more about what a special person he was. So thank you for joining me on that. And thank you for being here today. I first want to take a moment to thank a few people. I'd like to thank Governor Baker for his support of the MBTA. I'd like to thank Lieutenant Governor Polito as well for that support. I want to thank Secretary Pollack for ongoing support of the MBTA and particularly this project, which has seen its challenges. I particularly want to recognize John Dalton, who has been. Also want to thank the entire Green Line Extension team for the work that they've put in on this. And most importantly, I want to thank the riders and the communities that we serve and that we are looking forward to serving. It's going to extend the Green Line about 4.5 miles north along 2 branches from what will be Lechmere Station to Union Square in Somerville and College Ave in Medford. It's going to build 6 new stations. Done, the GLX project will have installed 100,000 railroad ties, nearly 4 miles of pilings, 22 million pounds of steel girders, 17 miles of permanent track, and 2 miles of a multi-use community path. We're looking forward to
COVID, which brings me, of course, to my update on many of our clusters have been the result of informal gatherings with no distance, no masks, shared food, an attempt in many respects, I think sometimes, very low levels of transmission, and we're able to open up and get kids back into the class in those places. In light of Boston's recent uptick, and respond accordingly. Just want to say that Boston in some respects is unique from all other communities, not just because it's the largest community in Massachusetts, but also because of its density. It's also home to a big concentration of colleges and universities and to several other large sectors, hospitals, nursing homes, other congregate type care facilities, where in fact there is always the possibility of spread. Our colleges and universities, in partnership with us and with the Broad Institute, have launched an extensive testing program, and that added testing has certainly helped us identify quickly additional cases among students and faculty and staff, which makes it possible to then isolate and quarantine those who are immediately affected and their close contacts, but that certainly contributes to an increase in positive cases. But in many respects, those are exactly the sort of things we should be doing if we want to limit the number of cases, especially in our college settings. But until there's a medical breakthrough, the virus will be with us, and we all need to stay vigilant, not let our guard down, and recognize and understand that a lot of those informal gatherings where people aren't doing the things that we talk about almost every day to manage the spread and limit infection will continue to be an issue for us. Now, with respect to today's visit to Lechmere Station, or what I should say, I guess, will be the new Lechmere Station, where we had a chance to get a look at what's going on with the Green Line extension. Last month, we completed a series of service shutdowns on the MBTA that sped up track and station improvement work by 2.5 years on other parts of our rapid transit system. That work translates to safer, more reliable service. The Green Line Extension project, while a lot bigger than many of these other initiatives, is similar in nature. Thanks to all the folks here in the yellow vests and the hard hats and many of the other 750 plus that are all the way up and down this line, working, by the way, around the clock under difficult circumstances, this transformational project is now more than halfway complete. The GLX project will have a major impact on the region by improving access to virtually everything. In one of the most congested parts of the eastern seaboard, it will increase access to education, housing, and job opportunities across our public transportation system. This $2.3 billion project extends the northern end of the Green Line about 4.7 miles from Lechmere to Union Square in Somerville and College Avenue in Medford. And one of the things we were told as we were walking along what will be eventually the platform up there was that before this project, 20% of the people of Somerville were within a quarter mile of public transportation stop. When this thing's finished, 80% of the people of Somerville will be within a quarter mile of a public transportation stop. Big improvement. The project also results in the construction of 7 new stations. We've had a couple of other milestones, but one in particular I want to mention. In 2018, we were pleased to be able to join with Cambridge officials, Somerville officials, and U.S. Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao to celebrate what Congressman Capuano at that time said was the 5th groundbreaking of the project. But it was the first one he thought actually meant it was going to happen because Secretary Chao showed up with $250 million in federal resources because the federal government had finally approved it. And at that point, we were off and running. Steve gave you some pretty good details on what's in this. I don't want to go through all those again, but I do want to say that later this month, the crews will have erected 100% of the steel necessary for the viaducts that are a critical part of this project, and the newly constructed bridges at Broadway and Washington Streets have also been reopened. Somerville Mayor Joe Curtatone, at that groundbreaking I was talking about with Secretary Chao, said this was a critical environmental justice project. It absolutely is. But it will also significantly reduce vehicle emission on our roads because of the scale, the location, and the convenience that this particular project will bring to the travel patterns of so many people in Greater Boston. I want to thank the entire GLX team for their work, and especially John Dalton for his leadership in moving the significant effort forward. I want to congratulate Secretary Pollack for the work that her team did to actually get this thing to the point where it could move forward. And I want to thank the T's General Manager, Steve Poftak, for his leadership in getting us to where we are today. It's a huge, game-changing project. We're proud of the progress that's been made to date. I can't wait at the end of next year. That is when it's supposed to be done, right? Yeah. So, everybody from the media, make sure somewhere in your story you say, project's due to be done at the end of next year, so I can take that, put it up on my wall, and constantly remind the people behind me that this project is due to be done at the end of next year. Really appreciate that. And finally, I'll just say, this project's being built across a whole series of very busy neighborhoods. And the work that's been done by this team to stay on time and on budget, despite all that, since this project began, is a real tribute to everybody who's been part of making it happen. And I just want to say thanks on behalf of the Commonwealth and on behalf of our administration for all that you've done to get us to this point, and we look forward to seeing it finished. With that, I'll turn it over to Secretary Pollack.
Thank you, and I'm delighted to be here today with 4 people standing behind me without whom we would not see this $2.3 billion project taking shape and reaching its critical 50% completion milestone. Back in 2016 and 17, it wasn't at all obvious that we would be able to build the Green Line extension. The MBTA was coming off a series of revelations about the condition of the organization as well as its assets that required us refocusing the T on delivering reliable service and fixing a backlog of asset improvement projects. And the federal funding that had been secured was in danger because the price of the project had gone up. Without the unyielding support of Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito, there's no way we would have gotten through that period of pressing the pause button, understanding what went wrong, downsizing the project, securing the necessary financing, including important contributions that came from the cities of Cambridge and Somerville, and getting the project back on track and procured. So I want to thank the governor and the lieutenant governor for their support for this transformative project. The project also wouldn't be here today if it weren't for the leadership of MBTA General Manager Steve Poftak. Steve has been clear since becoming general manager that the MBTA's capital delivery program was capable of simultaneously delivering the needed upgrades to all of their assets and delivering important expansion projects like the Green Line extension and South Coast Rail. And he and his team have made good on their word, delivering a record-breaking more than $1.5 billion in capital projects last year, including the spending on the Green Line extension and South Coast Rail, but also a series of accelerated projects on the Green Line, Red Line, and Blue Line that took advantage of lower ridership and lower traffic to get work done on the core part of the system that has been so in need of investment. So thank you, General Manager. And finally, the governor mentioned John Dalton. We knew when we were doing the look back on this project that one of the things that it was going to need was a full-time experienced manager who knew how to manage large-scale projects, design, build, teams like JLX contractors that have brought this to fruition. John relocated his family here to Massachusetts and took on the task, and we're delighted he's here, and he's a big part of the reason we're here today. This project represents not only an investment in transit, but an investment in Greater Boston and the community it serves. The return on the $2.3 billion investment is not just measured in concrete and steel or even trains and riders, but in the way it will transform the neighborhoods that it serves and enable the kind of development that you see with the cranes that surround us today. It's exactly the kind of investment that we need to be making in our transit system, and I'm delighted that it's moving forward the way it has. It also represents a collaboration between local partners, the cities of Cambridge and Somerville and Medford, and the state and our federal partners at the Federal Transit Administration, Regional Administrator Pete Butler and his team, who I'd also like to thank today. But finally, it represents a vote of confidence in the MBTA and its ability to deliver the world-class transit system that Greater Boston wants and needs. If you go just south of this project, you'll see work is also underway on the century-old viaduct that carries the Green Line trolleys over the Charles River past the Museum of Science and meets up with the new construction on the Green Line extension. That project wasn't part of the capital plan just a few years ago, and yet the team, realizing that it made sense to fix it at the same time that the Green Line trolley was going to be closed to do this Green Line work around Lechmere Station, the team was able to get it designed, bid, and in construction during the closure period for the Green Line. Again, a feat of collaboration and strategic investment in the core of the system that will pay off for all of our Green Line riders. So I'm delighted to join my colleagues today, celebrate the 50% completion, look forward to coming back when the project is done and the trains are running. Thank you, and Steve, turn it back over to you.
Sure. Thank you all for your attendance today. At this point, we will open the floor to questions, either myself or anyone else who is up here. sorry if I heard the question. The overall state of the T, both fiscally and operationally, given COVID, obviously we've faced challenges. We are in the middle of we are attempting to deal with next year's budget problems, attempting to begin addressing them now, so that we're in position to address them later. So obviously that is an ongoing process that will unfold this fall. In terms of operationally, we are spending $1 million more per week on PPE and cleaning and decontamination services than we did at the same time last year. We've made a massive investment cleaning our facilities and vehicles on a daily basis. When vehicles lay over in the middle of the day, we have them wiped down. We have an electrostatic fogging regime that we do twice a week. We offer testing to all of our employees. Any MBTA employee who would like to get tested can get tested through our in-house process. We have currently some number, I believe it's, I heard this morning it may have already changed, but we have 5 positive tests for COVID currently at the MBTA. So it is something that we are actively watching, and we are proactively quarantining people who have issues related to COVID. The lower ridership has clearly created a budget issue for us at the MBTA. The current kind of pro forma that we're looking at for next year shows a $308 million deficit. We are currently working on solutions to that. We're going to take a look at what type of in-house savings we can get. We are also going through a service planning process, which will unfold this fall, where again we will look to address that gap.
Trying to limit the number of times we take our masks off and put them back on. So ever since we started our reopening plan back in May, Jonathan, at that press conference when we said we were going to go ahead with phase 1, and Jonathan said, what do you think people are going to say? And I said, some people are going to say we're going too fast, and some people are going to say we're going too slow. And some of the people who said we were going too fast made some pretty outlandish predictions about what would happen, because we had a positive test rate at that point of 10%. Now, we said at the time that we were only going to open with guidance and advisories and enforcement of those guidance and advisories, and then we were going to do it on a phased basis, and we were going to follow both the data in Massachusetts and the real-life experience of people in other places as we made decisions going forward from there. We started with a 10% positive test rate and went down, 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 down as we continued to open to the point where we've been at or below 1% now for the better part of the past 2 or 3 months. Over that same period of time, we've continued to track and follow not just what's going on in here in Massachusetts, but what's been going on in other states as well, through the contact tracing and some of the other mechanisms that are available to us through local boards of health and all the rest. What our local boards of health and our contact tracing program has told us is that work in many cases, most cases, is not where spread develops, because people at work are relying on and abiding by the rules and the guidance and the advisories that have been issued by us. And we do have a fairly significant inspection and enforcement program that's done thousands and thousands of inspections, and in some cases, fines, closures, and enforcements of businesses and employers who have violated those criteria. The biggest concern we've had, and other states have experienced this as well, has much more to do with those informal, no rules, no guidance gatherings that are usually a part of daily life for most people, but it's something we've had to step back from. Virtually everything we talked about with respect to our reopening step 2 that's part of lower risk communities are things that have been going on in other states for a long period of time at this point, months, without any evidence in those states that those are the things that drive spread. We're going to continue to be a national leader on testing. We're going to continue to test in places where we believe we have the greatest risks, which are the red, so-called high-risk communities and the colleges and universities. And I fully expect that we will find cases as a result of doing that. It will be the finding of those cases and the isolation and quarantining and contact tracing that's associated with that that will be our greatest weapon in stopping the spread in those communities. We agree with that, and hopefully at some point we're going to have a better roadmap for people around exactly those kinds of issues. Say again? Yes, absolutely. Say again? So we rethink the reopening pretty much every day based on the data that we collect. North Andover is as good an example as any. North Andover went from green to red because of Merrimack College, okay? And it's because of the testing that we're doing in the colleges and the tracing follow-up that made it possible for people to figure that one out and contain it. And that's exactly the sort of thing we're going to continue to do as aggressively as we can going forward. But we rethink the decisions we made about reopening every time we look at data. And by the way, every time we talk to our colleagues in other states, too.
I wanted to ask you about the rules here in Cambridge. This is a city in the green. It is congested, but they're really going much further than you would go. They are requiring masks outside now. They took the summer off at midnight tonight. Masks have to be worn outside and in a workplace where more than 2 people are in. Is that going too far?
Look, I think one of the things we've tried to do is to message the value and the importance of masks and distancing, hand washing, hygiene, and the guidance and the advisories that we've issued to businesses and other employers, as well as the testing, tracing, and isolation and quarantining policies we have. And we've said from the beginning, if folks on the ground in particular communities believe they should do more, go for it. We've said that right from day one. We have put far more muscle into a lot of our initiatives around stopping the spread in communities that are high risk. But generally speaking, if a community believes, based on their population density or some other issue, that they need to go further than some of our statewide guidance, Lieutenant Governor and I are former local officials. We have no problem with locals going more aggressively. I will say this, if you look at sort of COVID generally, and you track a lot of the traffic in COVID around the rest of the country, population density is a really important issue. I mean, you can almost track population density in many cases to where some of the most severe outbreaks have taken place. So if a community like Cambridge, which is more dense than many other parts of Massachusetts, Somerville is too, and they choose to be more aggressive than the statewide standards because they are in fact more dense in terms of their population, I completely understand that. But I'd like that to be a decision that they make based on what they believe is going on the ground in their community. Yeah. Well, I think we believe that until these issues are completely and thoroughly investigated and signed off on by the feds, it shouldn't open. And my understanding is the feds made an unqualified statement earlier today saying just that, which we agree with and support. You're reminding me that we need to do a press briefing on this, which we'll do next week, because we have been talking to the hospitals and talking to our suppliers about gear and everything else. And I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. I would just say that, generally speaking, one of the things we're working hard to figure out here with our colleagues in the hospital community is the difference between the people who are in the hospitals are now testing everybody who comes through the ER or comes through admission. They're testing everybody. There's one hospital in Massachusetts that was on this morning's call with us that said they had It's either 5 or 6 COVID patients in-house. All but one were in there for another reason, but tested positive when they came in. So obviously they're treating them with all the protocols you treat to manage the infection, but they weren't there because they had COVID. They were there, they were asymptomatic. They were there because they had some other issue. And I've mentioned sort of off and on in my press conferences that when you call the hospitals and you talk to them one at a time, or the systems, a significant number of the people who we count as COVID positive are not in the hospital because they have COVID. They're in the hospital for some other purpose, and they got tested positive when they came in. That's an important element in how we think about managing COVID activity generally. And with respect to ventilators, I think we're in really good shape on that. I really would like to wait until next week when I can lay out all of this stuff. But we've continued to buy PPE. And by the way, we now have a bunch of companies in Massachusetts that manufacture it as well, which is great. And I think I feel pretty good about where we're going to be this fall. But we definitely need to have a presser on this, and we'll do it next week. We did make indoor visitation is now possible, and there are certain services under certain circumstances that can be provided on site in the facilities. And we currently we test obviously in the long-term care space pretty aggressively. Our current positive test rate in long-term care is about 1%. And we have a very aggressive testing program, not just for residents, but also for staff and contractors and sort of anybody and everybody who comes in